It's Monday morning, you're grabbing that last cup of coffee before sprint planning starts, and then you get a Slack message that changes everything. Hey, my dad passed away last night. I need to take some time. Your stomach drops, you feel terrible for your teammate, but within seconds, other thoughts start to crowd in. You start thinking about, what do I say? How long are they going to be gone? What's going to happen to the release? Are we going to be able to keep up? Should I tell the team? Should I let them share when they're ready? What do I do next? In episodes 1 and 2, we talked about building grief-resilient systems, foundations, organizational Slack, psychological safety. Now we're going to get into, in the moment and over the course of weeks and months, how you can support an employee who is going through loss and grief. This isn't an if, it's a when, because 24% of adults will experience bereavement annually. And your response in these first hours will either strengthen or fracture trust on your team. So today we're covering the complete roadmap for supporting a team member through grief, how to respond in those crucial first moments, communication frameworks that help without overwhelming, workload and team dynamics management, supporting both remote and in-person team members, and protecting yourself so you can sustain your support. As a framework, I'd like to introduce you to the C.A.R.E model. It stands for communication, accommodation, recognition, and emotional support. But we'll go deeper because this isn't just about being nice. It's about building a team that can handle human reality while delivering great products. So let's talk about your immediate response, that first 24 to 48 hours. This is a critical window, and research from the UK studying 40 bereaved employees found 2 themes that define supportive management: acknowledgement and response. Your first response sets the tone for everything that follows. Now, throughout this episode, I'm going to be sharing some different statements, some different resources, some templates. Don't feel like you got to write all this down. Just check out the show notes, and there are links to all of these things for you. So first thing we're going to talk about is what to say and what to not say. So some evidence-based helpful responses. I'm so sorry for your loss, or I don't know what to say, but I want you to know I'm here to support you. Even better, we'll take care of your duties while you're out. We'll miss you and look forward to your return when you're ready. Some examples of what not to say. Well, at least they're in a better place. I know exactly how you feel. Because even if you have experienced loss, everyone's loss and everybody's relationships are different. None of us can know exactly how somebody else feels. And in that moment of grief, our loss is so personal. We want support, but we don't want platitudes. Last, don't say, let me know if you need anything. It's too vague and it puts the burden on the person who is going through grief. If you get a message, like the Slack message I mentioned earlier, it's important to try to respond within 2 to 4 hours. And I'm going to talk later about how you don't always need to be on. You need to protect your time and your energy. But it is good as a leader to check in every 4 hours or less and see if you got anything critical you need to reply to. And when you get something like this, you do need to reply quickly. Something you don't want to do is get a message like this and then wait and escalate it and try to go to HR and talk to a bunch of other people before you respond. You, as the leader, need to respond quickly. Offer to be the single point of contact to prevent overwhelming check-ins. And if they've already designated a single point of contact, great, but let them know that you're willing to do that so that they don't have a billion people messaging them directly asking for information. Ask them what their preferred communication method is while they're out. They might prefer phone calls. Maybe they want texts so they don't have to talk to somebody. If you have a culture of video calls, they may not want to do video. And get clarity on how they want the team informed and what they want the team to know. Some people are more comfortable with the team knowing everything, but they don't necessarily want the rest of the company to know. Others would prefer that you share everything so that they don't have to do that. So that when they come back, they don't have to have that conversation over and over again. The important thing is that you follow their lead. So ask them what it is they would prefer. And once you get that information, then you're done. Let them go. Tell them that you're going to handle everything. For remote teams, even when somebody comes back, don't assume that they want video calls. Many prefer voice or text during grief. And be sure to be thinking about, as people are traveling, maybe they're having to have kind of an extended leave as they deal with estate issues. Maybe they're working remotely while they settle the estate. Think about time zone changes and how that might influence your standing meetings or regular connections. If they have any client-facing meetings, offer to take those immediately. Somebody who is in the midst of grief really shouldn't be client-facing in those first couple weeks. They're going to struggle to do a really good job with the client, but also it puts a really big burden on them. So just offer to take that immediately, even if you know you're going to end up assigning it to somebody else. The goal is to make sure that they don't have to be thinking or worrying about it. Within this first day, again, 24 to 48 hours, take inventory of their critical responsibilities. If you've already done the handoff worksheet that we talked about in episode 1, then you're already good to go. But if not, start thinking through what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks that they would normally be leading on. Make any temporary coverage decisions quickly. Don't wait for or ask for their input. They don't need to be dealing with that right now. But document any decisions that you make so you've got full transparency for when they return. So it makes it really easy for them to connect with people and pick things back up. Now, the elephant in the room is that while you care about your teammate, you also have business obligations. It's not an either or, though. These aren't mutually exclusive. Research shows that teams with proper grief support actually recover faster and perform better long-term than teams that just push through without addressing human reality. Again, because we know that this is unfortunately going to happen, great leaders are going to prepare in advance. They're going to have a team and systems built to handle this so that you can recover more quickly and progress and help the business out. Let's talk about some communication that really does help during these periods of grief and loss and change. So there's some research on check-in timing. Studies tracking bereaved employees over months revealed specific patterns that worked really well. In this first week or two, it's important that you communicate daily availability without requiring responses. And I'll give you some examples in the documents of what that might be. But your goal is to send them a quick note every single day for the first week or two to let them know you're thinking about them, you're available for them, you're taking care of things, but phrase it in a way that communicates they don't need to respond, they don't need to reply. If they don't even see it, that's totally okay. But it is meaningful that they get those messages. Once you get past this first couple of weeks, you move into kind of bi-weekly scheduled check-ins. And if this is a direct report, you may already have bi-weeklies. Great. If not, get something on the calendar for the first 1 to 3 months. You kind of have to take the temperature of the situation and how the person is doing to determine how long they need this. But at least for the first month, have some bi-weekly check-ins, maybe up through 3 months. And you don't have to just talk about the event, whatever it is that happened, but make sure that you're maintaining a steady connection. Once you get past that third month, then for months 3 to 12, have monthly informal check-ins with flexibility. You might be thinking 12 months, my goodness, this is a long time, but it does take a long time to grieve. And it's important that they have like this regular connection and somebody that knows about this situation, that knows about this loss, who is talking to them regularly about it. This isn't about you being their therapist or their counselor. This is about you being their leader and somebody who is connecting them to the business and supporting them so that they can be successful and in turn help your team and your company be successful. Throughout all of these check-ins, it gives you an opportunity to read the signals of the person, whether they need more contact or more space. Signs that they need more contact might include increased isolation or withdrawal from team activities. If they are withdrawing, that might actually mean that you need to be more deliberate about connecting with them. If their work performance is declining or they're missing deadlines, if there's visible distress, like crying or physical symptoms, more contact is appropriate. Now, if they're having difficulty concentrating or making decisions, and it's important to note that this contact doesn't all have to rest on you. This is something that you can get other team members involved. So if they're having some difficulty concentrating or making decisions, maybe pair them up with someone, either daily or a few times during the week for paired programming sessions if they're an engineer, or sort of thinking sessions if they're a designer, or having like coffee chats or something. But make sure they're getting some connection. Signs they need more space if they explicitly request privacy. Pretty good indication they might need some more space. If they start getting irritated with frequent check-ins, if you notice that their performance is better when they're working independently, maybe having somebody else there is distracting for them. We're all a little bit different with these things. So Again, these regular check-ins should be happening, but as you're having them, kind of get a feeling for what this employee needs. A structure for the regular check-ins: start with how they are doing personally. Always start with that. And this should be brief. Like, you don't really need to go in detail on this. I'll have a script in the documentation in the show notes that you can use just to give you an example. Don't read off a script in a Zoom call, but get some ideas and think in advance. Like, before you start the call, think through how you're going to talk with them, how long you're going to give to kind of each portion of the conversation, and how you're going to start. Start with how they're doing personally. Then ask about their current capacity and energy levels. I think it's important to be upfront about this and just say, how are you doing? Listen for a little bit and then say, okay, well, here's the work that's going on. How are you feeling in terms of your energy level, your ability to deliver? Where would you put yourself? Give it a percentage or a 1 through 10. Then, after you talk about capacity and energy levels, you want to review upcoming deadlines and priorities together. Just talk about what the team's working on, where you're headed. Offer specific support options, like some of those examples I mentioned earlier, like paired programming or taking client-facing meetings off their plate. And then set the next check-in timing. So if you've got a regularly scheduled biweekly already, great. But if you need to schedule something, do it before you get off this call. So by way of example, you might say, hey, Martin, how are you holding up this week? And then you listen for a little bit. So I wanted to touch base about your capacity. We've got this API review coming up on Thursday and the client demo next week. What feels manageable to you right now? Maybe pause, see how they're doing. And if they don't reply immediately, maybe offer some opportunities to help. So you might say, I can handle the client demo if that would help, or we can postpone the API review. What would be most helpful? I mentioned earlier, we've got to get the work done, but all the studies show if we support people, we're going to get the work done faster. And like we talked about in earlier episodes, if you can retain this employee through this loss, they're going to end up being more loyal. You're going to end up with better outcomes for them and your entire team. You're going to end up better in the long run. If they leave, the cost in hiring and training and upskilling and getting somebody else in, not just the cost of doing all that, but the opportunity cost of the work that's lost in the meantime is so much greater. This really is worth an investment in your time and energy. But leaving the business aspects aside, we should just treat people well. Like, this is something, as a leader, part of our why should be because we care about our employees. We care about our team members. And we hurt for them when they're going through loss like this. And so taking care of them, offering support for them is all really good and important for us to do. If your team members are remote or hybrid, be sure to ask before defaulting to video. I would recommend defaulting to video off. And if they turn the video on, then you can match them. But always try to match kind of their communication preferences and what they're doing. You also can use asynchronous video messages for updates that they can watch when ready. Just don't interpret the camera being off as disengagement or them not caring. It could just be that it's one more emotional sort of engagement or touch point that they can't handle right now. In terms of what to tell the rest of the team, follow their preferences. A good general framework, especially if they haven't kind of given you any guidance on what they want, is to keep it as high level as possible. You do have to say something. So you might say something like, Martin is dealing with a family loss and is going to be out for at least the next week. Let's rally around them by taking these specific actions. And giving some specific actions for the team to do is going to help them also, because we want to support our teammate. We look for things to do. And if you can give them some things to do, especially things that don't include them reaching out to the teammate and kind of burdening them and sending them additional messages, that can be really helpful. You want to shield the grieving person from having to repeatedly explain their situation to team members or other people in the company. So again, designate yourself or one close teammate as the communication point and give the team specific ways to help rather than leaving it open-ended. One that I have both been the recipient of and that I have done in terms of sending before is to kind of, as a team, pull some money together to send something nice to the person who is out of work for a while and they're grieving. They've lost somebody. Maybe they're having a severe health issue, whatever the situation might be. And for me personally, I've been on the receiving end of some lovely chocolates. And what I liked about that was every time I ate one of those chocolates, I remembered that my team cared about me. It wasn't just this one-time thing. It was this kind of over the course of a week. And that was really meaningful. The way that you accomplish that, because you probably don't know their home address, is to talk with your human resources and say, hey, our team has pulled some money together. We want to send them a gift. Here's what we suggest. Here's the cost. We will pay for it. Can you send it to their home address while they're out and grieving? And I've never had a human resources turn that down. They won't give you the person's address. They're going to keep that private, but they'll typically send something on the company's behalf. And, maybe they'll offer to foot the bill, or your team can pay for it. So let's move on to workload and accommodation strategies. Research shows that bereaved employees, and again, I should mention, a lot of the time in this, I'm kind of focused on the loss of a loved one, death, but this could be any number of issues. It could be a serious injury, a cancer diagnosis, divorce. There's a lot that can cause loss and grief to arise in us. Whatever the case is, people who are going through this type of loss and change experience 30 to 50% decreased productivity in the first 6 months, with cognitive impacts such as concentration and decision-making lasting even longer. Now, I should mention, this isn't the case of what I might call a serious loss or change. I've had quite a few employees where they need to take bereavement leave to go to the funeral for an aunt or uncle. And I respond the same way as what I'm talking about here. I kind of go all in and like, hey, we're going to take care of you. We're going to take these things off your plate. What would you like me to say to the team? And they go, oh, we weren't that close. It was like a distant aunt. I'm going to go to the funeral for my family. I'll be back at work, on Friday. Again, follow their lead. But if they've lost a spouse, they've lost a child, grandparent that they lived with, whatever it is, again, follow their lead. If they're communicating it's serious and they're experiencing that serious impact, you can expect 30 to 50% decreased productivity in the first 6 months and challenges with concentration and decision-making that lasts even longer. It's not a character flaw. It's neuroscience. And I will say personally, I find it to be extremely frustrating neuroscience. I kind of hate that our brain does this to us. I've experienced this a couple times. And the first time was when I was 15. My niece, Lynette, died in a car accident. And we were extremely close. She was the person I was probably closest to in my family. And losing her, it gutted me. It just destroyed me. And after her funeral, we came home. I was 15. I was going to school. I wasn't working yet. And I would go to school in the morning, and I would come home in the afternoon, and I would sit in a chair in my bedroom and stare at the wall for 5 hours. And then I'd go to bed. And I'd get up the next morning and go to school and come home and sit and just stare at the wall, catatonic. For 4 months, that is all I did. I didn't do any homework. I didn't read books. I didn't write papers. I didn't spend time with friends. I did nothing. I sat and stared at the wall. And one day I just kind of woke up and started getting back to regular life. There's something in our brains when we experience, kind of an excruciating loss, it really messes with us. And that type of response, while it is sort of a biological, neurological thing, in the midst of work, we've kind of got to coach somebody through that. And so what you need to do as a leader is some critical path analysis to identify what only the grieving person can do versus what others can do. Look at client-facing commitments in the next 2 to 4 weeks, assign those to somebody else, review any decisions that require their specific expertise, and then walk alongside them. Somebody who's grieving, even to the level that I was, they're not useless. They're not completely broken. They still have valuable knowledge, valuable capabilities, but their capacity is going to be much lower in language that has, I think, become very common in the last few years. They've got a lot fewer spoons available. And so you and your team can come alongside them to make sure that the work that demands their specific expertise is still getting done, that you are helping them move through this time. And then once you get out the other side, they will get better and the team will be better as a result. So during this time of coverage, it's important to have some documentation. You need a quick knowledge transfer doc done in the first 48 hours. Again, that handoff worksheet from episode 1, do that. You're going to be in great shape. Make sure that any sort of access credentials are taken care of. I've seen engineers leave who were the sole people for SSL certs. And then the SSL cert expires while they're on leave and everybody's scrambling because the website's down. Like, make sure you've built a resilient system so that you don't even get yourself in that trouble to begin with. But make sure any sort of access credentials, handoff notes are done, and there's client context for anyone taking over external communications. So like I said, the first 2 to 4 weeks, the grieving person shouldn't be doing any sort of client-facing meetings. Whoever's taking over needs to get the context. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you've built a system to capture it in advance. In terms of the person's return to work, there's a few different strategies. This probably should be coordinated with your human resources department. There's a phased return approach where you can have them start back to work 2 to 4 hours a day, focus on some low stakes work, and then gradually increase responsibilities over 2 to 3 weeks. And certainly avoid any high pressure decisions or client presentations. The approach that I typically take is one of task modification. So if they are a lead, if they're a manager, if they've got any direct reports or there's a project that they're a lead on, shift them to a contributor role temporarily, reduce any sort of architecture decisions, focus just on the implementation and execution. And if there's complex work, then maybe implement pair programming or sort of collaborative design workshops or something that provides support and maintains quality. For remote team members, I already mentioned thinking through changes in time zones. Another thing is that you do need to be extra explicit about expectations. You can't read their body language. You're not going to see them in the office. It's a little harder to follow up. So make sure that you're setting dates, times, deliverables. Just over-communicate about what it is that you need and encourage them to over-communicate about what it is that they need. In episode 1, as we talked about building resilient systems, I said you should probably have a buffer in your sprinting, story points, however it is that you go about managing your workload, and only schedule to about 80% of your theoretical maximum. For somebody who is grieving, I recommend dropping their commitment to about 50%. So if they could normally do 21 story points a sprint, maybe drop them down to 10 or 12. And again, this is why I personally like sprints and story point estimates. It's because it gives you that feel where when you do need to decrease somebody's work, you know how to do that while still having them move things forward. Make sure, though, that as you do this, you're not just piling their work onto others. You need to negotiate scope reductions overall, communicate to stakeholders that delivery is going to slow down a little bit, and maybe use this as an opportunity to tackle some technical debt or documentation, have them take on some lower stakes work. In terms of talking with your stakeholders, prepare some simple explanations for the timeline impacts. So, for instance, you might say, we're supporting a team member through a family emergency, and we're adjusting our timeline accordingly. Most people are not monsters. They understand this. And we've all experienced loss. We all know what it is to go through this and how much it sucks. So you've got to respect the grieving person's privacy, but you can communicate that somebody's had a loss, we're slowing down a little bit, but focus on what you can deliver rather than what's delayed. So focus on what it is that they are going to be getting and when they're going to get that. And that will help ameliorate a lot of the frustration that might otherwise arise. Now, depending on how long it takes the person to kind of recover from this neurological impact of grief, the team might raise questions around fairness. Some team members may feel it's unfair that they're having to cover extra work, take on maybe languages or duties that they haven't had to deal with before. I think it's important to address this head on, and I typically do it in one-to-ones. So in a one-to-one with somebody, I would try to coach them through it and remind them that This is how we treat each other when life happens. We support them, and everyone is going to need this kind of support someday. So by covering for this team member now, we are building the kind of team that will support each of us, that will support you when you need it. Now, aside from kind of trying to coach them through it and help them to feel better, you should also make sure that you've got some practical equity steps in place. So making sure that you rotate who is covering what instead of always putting everything on the same person. Also acknowledge this extra effort publicly, give people praise for stepping up and supporting and doing some extra work. And depending on your pay situation at the company and what options are available to you, get people comp time or other recognition for people who are covering work. Which brings us to long-term accommodation planning. Once you get to about 3 months, you should kind of reassess and see how the person's doing. Grief doesn't follow sprint schedules. So every quarter for the first year, kind of, again, take the temperature, see how they're doing. Depending on the time of year, it may be appropriate to try and adjust their performance evaluation. Again, this is something you have to coordinate with HR. You might explore temporarily removing any stretch goals or development objectives from them. Just focus on core job requirements. And be sure to document any accommodations to protect them during review cycles. If they had a promotion coming up, I know some companies have kind of like very specific timelines for promotions where you could be considered after 2 years or something. But again, grief doesn't happen on a convenient schedule for us. So discuss with the person, discuss with HR, pausing promotion timeline discussions for 6 to 12 months. This isn't to punish them, but their performance, it just isn't going to be as good during this period of time. And you don't want them losing out on a promotion because of this loss. Don't assign any high visibility projects immediately upon their return. Kind of see how things are going first, but maintain their inclusion in team development opportunities when they're ready. Again, we want to kind of normalize and standardize things. We want them to feel like they're supported and included. They're still part of the team. They're still part of the company. And while we are building these approaches and systems and language to support the person who is experiencing loss and change, you also, as the leader, have to support your team through what this other person is experiencing. Research shows that one team member's grief creates emotional contagion throughout the team. And particularly if you're in an office setting or you're on calls, if the person is visibly and audibly experiencing grief, if they're kind of having these spikes of emotional pain when they're around other people, it can disrupt everybody else. It might be reminding them of their own loss that they've experienced in the past, and impacting work beyond the individual who has most recently experienced loss. So typically what I will do for the larger team is in the very first meeting, like let's say you get that Slack message right before sprint planning, I would go into sprint planning and say, hey, this person has experienced a loss. They're going to be gone for a couple of weeks. And so we're going to shift some things as a result. And also, as you think about this person and this loss, it might trigger you to think about your own losses in the past and your own grief. And if that happens, it's totally natural. I want to recommend that you take advantage of our EAP resources or grief support resources. Just in general, what you're doing here is giving people permission to take care of themselves too. And sometimes we can feel like a little bit of guilt about that, of like, well, I'm not the person who just lost somebody, so why should I be feeling bad? Why should I be taking up these resources, impacting other people's work? Just try and support people. So one example might be saying, I realize that Martin's loss might bring up difficult feelings for some of you, and that's completely normal. If you need support processing your own feelings, here are resources available to you. Now, last, we've talked about supporting the grieving team member. We've talked about supporting the rest of the team. It's also important to protect yourself as the leader. Supporting a grieving team member requires significant emotional labor, and research shows managers who regularly provide empathic support face elevated risks of burnout and compassion fatigue. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Your team needs you to be stable and present, not just during the crisis, but for the months of ongoing support that follow. So the first thing that you can do is set healthy boundaries. Set some time boundaries, schedule specific times for those grief-related check-ins rather than being always available. Particularly if you got Microsoft Teams or Slack or something else, we might feel this burden of like, we are always on, we're waiting for a message, we're replying immediately. But you need to protect your own focus time for critical work, and you need to protect your own emotional energy. So set expectations about response times and make sure that you're blocking time still for getting your other stuff done. Also set some emotional boundaries. Remind yourself you are their manager, not their therapist. And it is totally okay to acknowledge that some conversations are beyond your expertise. You absolutely should be trying to refer people to an EAP or to counseling for deeper support. And if you ever get on a call where somebody is just kind of trauma dumping on you and sharing a bunch of stuff, you absolutely can, gently, respectfully kind of cut them off and say, hey, it sounds like this is really hard. I'm not really equipped to help you with this. But here is the phone number for our EAP, and they can get you in touch with somebody who can help you. You should also build your support system. So find a manager who can be peer support for you. Ideally, connect with other managers who have handled similar situations. You shouldn't try to figure this out alone. Ask for guidance from more experienced leaders. And I'll take this moment to plug Fieldway Studio. You can learn more at fieldway.org/coaching. If you are trying to support somebody who's going through grief or a team that is grieving, again, you don't have to go through it alone. I'm here for you at fieldway.org/coaching. You should also loop in HR early for policy guidance and resource coordination. Let them know what's going on. And if complex accommodation is required, use them as a buffer to kind of figure that out. They also can help you with team communication if needed. Just like we watch for signs in an employee to see if they need more or less space, you should be watching for signs in yourself to find out if you need more support. If you start dreading interactions with a grieving team member or feeling responsible for fixing their grief, if you start neglecting other team members and responsibilities, or you're taking grief updates home with you emotionally, those are all signs that you need more support. When you're feeling overwhelmed, consider temporarily increasing HR's involvement. Maybe they need to take on a bit more of this burden for you. You can also delegate some support tasks to senior team members and use your own EAP resources. It is completely legitimate to go to your employee assistance program and get a referral to a counselor to talk with them about, how you're trying to support somebody else. You also can consider grief counseling for managers, which does exist, or connect with a coach. Remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Your team member may need support for months, not weeks. So pace yourself accordingly. Going back to that check-in schedule I mentioned earlier, it's weekly check-ins once you get past that first couple weeks, not daily. Don't try to grind yourself out of staying connected every single day, every hour of every day. And if you're making arrangements or you're setting up a schedule, do kind of a monthly assessment of that, not constant adjustments. You don't want to have to constantly be dealing with the decision fatigue of moving stuff around and shifting things. And then a quarterly review of long-term needs. It's not about being heartless. It's about being sustainably helpful over the time period that grief actually requires. And we should be in it for the long haul. We should be supporting somebody over the course of that year. But in order to do that, we have to build a system that protects the team and protects us too, in order to help that person and to help our company. So our reflection prompt for today is quite a bit longer than usual. I'm going to give you some homework to do. And you need to do this before the situation arises on your team. First, think through your own personal grief history. Because like I said earlier, we often will be triggered by somebody else's grief. And if we can do a bit of that processing work in advance so that we are prepared to lead our team and to lead this individual, we're going to be in a much better position. So think through how you have processed major losses in your own life. And what did you need from others? What wasn't helpful? And how might this inform your approach as a leader? Second, do a team readiness assessment. So look at your current team and think through, do you have adequate documentation for knowledge transfer? Have you done that handoff worksheet yet? Have you done cross-training for critical skills? Is there organizational slack for coverage, or what gaps need addressing? Write these down, think through it. Assess your communication comfort level. How comfortable are you with these emotional conversations? And where do you need to build skills or seek support? What specific phrases can you practice for initial grief responses? And as somebody who has experienced a tremendous amount of loss, share something from my own experience. I don't know that this will be true for everybody. Like, I don't want people just to give me platitudes. Like, I want them to actually mean what they're saying. But even if they're saying something that's kind of like a practiced phrase, like, you know that they've read this in advance and they've thought about it and they prepared to say it, it still meant something to me. It still comforted me because the person took that time and effort to reach out and connect. And so if you put in some effort to practice some initial grief responses first, that doesn't take away from your care and support. It doesn't devalue the work that you're doing, and the person will still receive it in the way that it is intended. Next, think through your boundaries in advance. What are your own emotional boundaries around supporting others through grief? And how will you recognize when you need additional support or resources? Last, do the research now on what your organizational resources are. What grief support resources does your company offer? Do you have an EAP program or flexible leave programs or counseling services? If you don't know, find out now before you need them. And this could just be a quick email to HR. Let them write it down for you. But get that at hand, have the phone numbers, have the email addresses. Go ahead and have that. If you're a leader in an organization, you really should have that in a note somewhere that you can find it quickly. Remember that throughout all of this, you're not just handling a crisis, you're modeling how your team treats each other during difficult times. Every grief situation builds or erodes trust and psychological safety for future challenges. The way that you handle this will ripple through your team's culture for years. So make it a ripple of compassion, competence, and care. You cannot ignore grief and hope it goes away. The research is clear. Unaddressed grief costs organizations billions in lost productivity and turnover. But more importantly, how you respond to your team members' grief either builds or breaks the trust that holds your team together. This isn't about becoming a grief counselor. It's about becoming a competent, compassionate leader who can handle human reality. The frameworks we covered today, the C.A.R.E model, communication timing, workload management, and self-care, give you concrete tools for what will feel like an overwhelming situation. Next episode, we'll turn the lens inward, leading through your own grief. Because sometimes you're the one facing loss, and you still have a team depending on you. We'll explore how to maintain leadership effectiveness while processing your own grief, and when transparency helps versus hurts your team's performance. Talk soon.